Hello, this is a video to follow up a professional development workshop I did for the English department at ADVETI, and the title of the workshop was Production Stage in an ESL Lesson. In the workshop we did a discussion about practice, we did a review of lesson staging, we talked about the importance of the production stage, we discussed some production stage activities, and then we finished with a workshop. So just to introduce, to lead in, I talked about practicing and practicing making perfect. I asked my attendees to look at these questions and think of their answer and discuss. The hobby that I used to be good at was playing the piano. I got into the hobby by my family was quite musical. My mother wanted us to have an instrument, and a piano seemed like a good one for us to play. How did I learn? Well, me and my brother, we had lessons every week with a man who used to come to the house, Mr. Jones, and the support, well, we had support from his teacher, but we also had support from my parents my parents paid for the piano, they paid for the lessons. We had music that was bought for us, and then at school we also had support from music teachers who allowed us to perform for school assemblies, school concerts, and things like this. My practice was mainly for exams, so I didn't really play for my own enjoyment. I played to pass through the exams, and I would used to do scales and the certain things that you had to do to achieve each grade. I achieved grade 8 by the end. I don't know how that works across the world, but that is the British system. And I used to practice the compositions that we had to play for those grades. And now, I admit, I went a few years without playing, and I certainly don't play the kind of music I played then. Now I'll just play music I like, pop songs, rock songs, ballads that I enjoy. And every Christmas I'll play for my kids, and we'll do a Christmas concert with our friends, and we'll all sing carols. So that's pretty much the only time I get to play now. So looking at lesson staging, I'm just talking about a standard PPP lesson. Obviously there's different approaches, but a lot of lessons fit into this staging. In the presentation stage, you would have the teacher presenting the context and the situation for the language. The teacher would show the meaning and the form of the target language, and they would tend to use a book or their own materials. The practice stage would be practicing this target language in a controlled form, like a drill, a gap fill, a sentence jumble. You may teach spelling or pronunciation rules here. You may also teach these in the presentation stage. And we would tend to use, in our department, we would use the LMS, the ebook, or the MyLab, or our own materials. So the production stage comes after this usually, and it's where students would use the target language more freely, more communicatively. They talk about themselves or other people, but in a real-world context. And the focus is on the task that's performed rather than specific words to use, but like personalized. And then we'd also do personalization of activities. How important is a production stage? So for this, I looked at some of my favorite authors in ESL, so Thornbury, Hedge, and Harmer. The key thing was that a production stage moves this language into a permanent memory. If you do rote learning, so practice and just keep doing practice, it doesn't have that long-term effect. They need to do something with the language. They need to organize it for it to be deep learning. The new knowledge must be integrated with existing knowledge, so this is where putting them in authentic situations can help. It gives you the opportunity as a teacher to assess the learning that's been done. A learner will remember the word more deeply when it's more demanding, so this is where differentiation comes in. You need to challenge the student so that the learning goes deeper in. Use it in a sentence in free speech rather than matching to meaning. Learners will make a judgment if it's personalized. What does it mean to them? So when you set them a task, make it something that is familiar to them. If you put them in a role play of something they will never be involved in, then it won't mean anything to them, and their experience won't relate to it. If it's an interesting activity, if it's kinesthetic, if it's tactile, if it involves other people, it builds the motivation If you spend more time on it, it increases the memory. And if it's challenging, you need more attention, and that can provoke an emotional response. This is a delicate area, but if you put students in an area where they have to think quite emotionally, then that can enhance the learning. You want to tread carefully, you don't want to go into any taboo issues, but you could set something that would require some attention. When you plan a production stage, you need to decide on the production skill. Is it writing or speaking? You need to set up the task, give clear instructions, check with ICQs. You need to give a time. Don't worry if the time is short, you can always repeat the task. Classroom management, so how are you going to arrange the students if there's going to be a lot of noise? How are they going to speak in the room? You might need to move them around in different ways. How would they sit? Error correction, so how are you going to monitor their language production? Are you going to write it down? Are you going to correct at the time? Are you going to give peer feedback? Think about this. How are they going to feedback? Are they going to write it on the board? Are they going to show it individually? Think about the stronger, the weaker learners and how that will work. Differentiation, again, set different tasks for stronger students, set easier tasks for weaker students, just adjust it so that they can achieve the task. Alternative staging. Like I said before, not everything is PPP. You could also, well, it'll be PPP at some stage, but if you do the engage to the activate structure, then you might put activate, which is the same as production. You might put that at different stages of the lesson, especially if you're teaching small grammar or vocab points. Think about that. And repeat it. You can always repeat it in the same lesson. You can repeat it in the next lesson. You can come back to it the next week. Don't feel worried about repeating a production stage. They can, if they achieve it well, it can, and they'll feel more confident the second time that they do it. So we are looking now at examples of production stage activities. Here are 3 examples. Write 5 sentences to describe what other people in the class aren't or aren't wearing. Number 2, prepare to talk about a holiday to visit your friends or family that you remember well. Make notes, use the questions. And then the 3rd example, write 3 sentences about weather, travel and studies. Now, if you can tell by the pictures, everyone's sleeping. I'm trying to make the point here that these are pretty normal, standard ones you see in core textbooks. And to be honest, this was a sample lesson plan that I made myself. When I looked at it, I was like, that's a pretty boring activity. The point is, they will use the language. There's nothing wrong with doing a production stage activity like this. But if you do this in every lesson, then eventually the students will get a bit tired of the same approach. So I wanted to put up some alternative production stage activities. So I'm going to show a selection of different ones. Some might be for high level, some might be for low level. But it's room for discussion. I can share them at the end of the presentation. So here we go. Find the difference. Well, this is where you would have a picture, A and B, and the students need to find the difference. This might be easy for the stronger learners, but you can adjust it to what you need. You can set different tasks for each student to differentiate. You can use simple image editing tools if you want to change them yourself. You can change colors, you can blur out things. It's not the hardest thing to create. Again, an A and B crossword, and these are all A and B type activities. You can create a crossword, and it's where you keep all the answers, save it as a JPEG, and then use Microsoft Paint quite simply to erase the across answers or erase the down answers, and then A and B give the definitions for each one. Information exchange, similar to the crossword. This is where they would have different information on the sheet, and they have to ask and answer questions to each other to fill in their sheet. And here are just some basic examples that I showed. So here would be picture A, here would be picture B, and there's some slight differences in the hats and the colours. The students would discuss them. Crosswords, here you go. Here's all the down answers, here's all the across answers. students would have to describe the word journey to the other student. They would have a few of the letters and they would be able to write it in. And then an information exchange, you could have 3 different sheets of famous people, and this is for a low level. They would ask and answer questions about each one. So coming back to the presentation, the second type of production activities, these were a bit more complicated but to do with stories. A dictogloss is an excellent activity. It's not always just production, it can be a whole lesson, but it's a long production activity. It combines all the skills. You would tell an anecdote, students listen, they retell the story, take notes. You can repeat the story if necessary, and then they retell the story using their own notes. A circle recording using the target language. They would only be allowed to record the language when they have the correct grammatical pronunciation. So it might take them a minute or two to get 10 correct words together, but once they're ready, they press record. You can use a mobile phone for this. And then at the end, when they play it back, they have their own authentic language played. So excellent activity. And then finishing the story, production activities. So you give them the start of the story and they complete it. A little bit different than just a gap fill. So here are the examples. A dictogloss, this was just a story of my own and it would use target language, and I just typed this up and you would read it out to the students. Circle recording. Here's an example. Hello, my name is Sarah. Hello, me Fatima. No, it's not correct. Hello, I'm Fatima. Yes, you can record. So they would follow this, and then at the end they would only hear what is in green, and then they would have a good task, a good recording of what they've discussed. And then finishing the story, I started an interesting story. It was personalized for our students. It talked about going to the mall, and they completed the story. You might set them some prompt questions. You might not. That's where the differentiation would come in. Production stage activities 3. This is where you could have a board game, where you make your own board game that could be used every single time, and the students play a game just to use the target language. Rankings, if you have good new vocab, rank them in certain orders so that the students have to discuss, use the language actively, argue about it, defend why they think it is. They might paraphrase here. And surveys are find someone who to do this, but find someone who's tend to be yes or no. If you did a Likert scale, so 1 to 5, you gauge a strength of opinion and you might get more interesting discussions. And here are some examples. I'm rushing a little quickly now because I'm running out of time for the recording. Here's a board game that I would use. I've just made it. Students would have to use a certain language point on each symbol, and you have different activities. Rankings. Here's some adjectives, and they need to discuss what's the important thing when buying a gift. And surveys, rather than just simple yes, no, I've put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so they can discuss how strong their opinion is on these things. And then the final activities were things like role plays, debates, discussions, things that get students together, standing up, and in a different format than just pen and paper or to computer. So here are just some brief examples of that. Here's a role play, police officer and suspect, and a debate where you set a thing and they need to discuss which ones they would use. So to just complete this presentation, I would then put the groups into a workshop to discuss their own activity using one of these formats and to feedback, but not for this video. So just to recap, practice doesn't always make perfect. A production stage needs to get the language used more freely. If it's not cognitively demanding, the memory will not be as deep. You need to make it this. Consider certain things when you're planning the production stage, and just avoid doing repeating activities like write 5 sentences, speak for 2 minutes. Try alternatives like the suggestions I made. Okay, thank you. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.